Return to Silent Hill. At Paleville National Park, James Sunderland, a painter meets Mary Crane, whose suitcase is dislodged, following a near accident with a logging truck. Due to this, Mary is unable to catch the bus to the city, and a remorseful James decides to accompany her back to the lakeside town of Silent Hill. As they are prepared to leave, the town is suddenly approached by a thunderstorm, and Mary briefly appears as a drowned corpse. Startled, James is awakened in a pub and accidentally instigated a bar fight before being thrown out. He receives a call from his therapist, who advises him to rest and meet at their appointment tomorrow. Returning home, James gets a letter from Mary, who pleads him to come back to their special place in Silent Hill. He hastily returns to the place where they first met and sets on the trail to town the following morning. Along the way, he meets Angela, who asks him to grab a sandbag and prevent the graveyard from being overflown with water. The encounter leaves James unsettled, and he continues on to town, remembering their conversation of him wanting to move into town with Mary, despite her fears and doubts. Arriving at Silent Hill, James finds the town desolated and covered in ashes. Exploring the abandoned town, James comes across a homeless man who warns him they are coming back, and receives another call from his therapist, who, a terrified James, tells something was wrong with the town and he is searching for his beloved. She reminds him there was nothing for him there anymore, but he ignores her after seeing a flickering light from Heaven's nightclub. James reminisces the time he was introduced to Mary's acquaintances. As he investigates the club, the homeless man encounters one of monstrous creatures and is killed, with his body melted and charred. Hearing the man's screams, James sees the grueling sight and is attacked but defends himself against the figure who crawls away. Hearing the static noise emitted by the radio, James listens to the broadcast, which warns its denizens to evacuate the town. Immediately after, the town is shifted to the other world and more creatures started to appear. Pursued by lying figures and cockroach-like creatures, James flees to Woodside apartment and bars himself inside. There, James remembers the time he was moving in with Mary. Investigating a room with a static TV, James is triggered by gruesome images of Mary and quickly calls back his therapist, who he cryptically tells her he could feel Mary's call towards him and cannot stop it, but the call is ended by James's phone's low battery. Unable to call him back, the therapist asks for a wellness check on her patient. Meanwhile, James ascends to the room above him, finding a mannequin with Mary's clothing, surrounded by moths and a shrine. He then recalls Mary and her 20 acquaintances of their communion session, with James noticing its sinister undertone before it was quickly ended upon entering. James was uneasy of their presence, but Mary defended them, claiming they were her family who took her in, following her father's death. He saw a shrine dedicated to her father, which Mary quickly hid and wanted their relationship to just be them only. Back in present, James meets a townsguy named Eddie, who claims the people were ill and turned insane. Hearing a child's cry, the two investigate, only to find parts of apartment segregated by bars. On the other side, they see a young girl named Laura who is hiding in a garbage chute. James tries to aid Laura, whereas Eddie wants to abandon her and flee. Suddenly, a pyramid head-shaped creature prowls towards them, causing Eddie to scare Laura away, and James beaten and abandoned after being scolded for his crassness. He flees as the pyramid head attempt to break through the bars and encounters a Mary mannequin, spider-like creature. Hiding himself in the closet, James sees Pyramid Head punches the spider-like creature to death before being discovered, and see glimpses of himself within the Pyramid Head. The town's siren suddenly blared, shifting back to the fog world, albeit causing both mental harm. Stepping out of the closet, James meets Angela again, who had warned him not to come back, and says he cannot save Mary. He tries to approach her for answer, but she defensively held her knife out and demands him to go. Outside, James again meets Laura, who says Mary had gave her the doll. Before he can get answers, Laura is startled by a noise and flees to Rosewater Park with James in pursuit. However, he loses her in the labyrinth, but meets Maria, who resembles Mary. Maria decides to accompany James to Brookhaven Hospital. At the intersection, James recalls he had tailed Mary and her acquaintances down to the sewage tunnels, but is snapped back to reality by Maria. Inside, Maria finds a tape revealing Mary was slowly dying of poison after being exposed to unknown substances by members of a cult founded by her father Joshua. He remembers fully that he had found Mary drugged and participated of a ritual in the sewers. Back in reality, the town is shifted to the other world. Thinking they need to save Mary, James and Maria rush through the hospital only to encounter monstrous nurses, one of which wounds Maria. He takes her to safety and patches her up before leaving to find Mary again. Outside, James sees Laura, who goads him for abandoning Mary and lures him to a room with a giant, monstrous, moth-like version of Mary. He is dragged upward, but suddenly finds himself back at Brookhaven Hospital in its normal state. He is told by his psychologist Mary has been dead for months, following their breakup after James confronted her about the ritual and was unable to convince her to leave town with him. After thanking his psychologist for her help, the town is shifted back to the other world. Back in reality, Maria pleads James to leave town together, but he abandons her to leave for the basement. Maria follows him to the elevator and they end up at a labyrinthian gallery with multiple Mary's paintings. She pleads him to turn back, but James firmly believes Mary is still alive for him, and here Maria leaves him. James awakes outside of the burning Lakeview Hotel. There, he sees Mary's hospital bed and remembers that several months prior, he returned to Silent Hill after learning Mary was admitted to Brookhaven Hospital due to continuous exposure from the unknown drug she was given by her father's cult. In their final meeting, Mary admitted to have been trying to protect him from the cult and asked James to set her free. He reluctantly did so by smothering her to death with a towel, seeing a moth in the process. Back in reality, the bed levitates and transforms into Moth Mary, who James apologizes. Seeing as he cannot forgive himself and yearns to reunite with her in death, James puts Mary's body in his car and he drives off the pier, drowning himself. Suddenly, James is back at the moment where he first met Mary at Paleville National Park. However, this time, he chooses to drive her out of town and into the city.